I'm really excited to announce our next speaker, Alice Yuan Zhang, who is coming to us from Los Angeles. Hang on. Sorry, guys. Jesus Lord. What did I do here? I need an escape strategy for myself. Holy moly. Okay, guys, I'm super excited to announce Alice Yuan Zhang, who is a media artist, researcher, and educator based between Berlin and Los Angeles. Her transdisciplinary practice operates on cyclical and intergenerational time. Along the peripheries of colonialist imagination, she works to bring technology down to earth by devising collective experiments in ancestral remembering, interspecies pedagogy, and networked solidarity. She's also the founding steward of the Virtual Care Lab, a DWeb fellow, and a recent resident at Oxalon. Take it away, Alice.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I hope y'all had a good lunch and are feeling well rested and inspired and excited to be here today. I'm feeling really resonant with a lot of the ideas that we talked about this morning as well, and I think you'll find that what I have to tell you is a bit of a continuation of that and an unraveling. Yeah. My name is Alice. My Chinese name is Zhang Yuan. I was born in Dalian, China, and moved to suburban Los Angeles when I was 9 with my parents, and so first-generation immigrant. And I have a dogmatic Buddhist mother who shows up a lot in my work, gives me a different perspective on things that you might pick up on. Yeah, and I'm trying to see what's going on. I'm trying to understand what's going on out here. I'm trying to understand how we are relating to the world and how technology helps us do that, or shapes our relations in particular ways. And I'm interested in agency, in collective agency, in learning how to do things together. And in this bridging of the bit sphere and biosphere, which comes from the experimental physicist Ursula Franklin, who in her lectures in 1989 called The Real World of Technology, called this task of bridging the bit sphere and biosphere the struggle for community in the broadest ecological context. So I'm out here trying to do that. Okay, not to scare you a little bit right from the bat. As a media artist, I engage with various digital technologies to meet people where they are and to tell stories and to stay connected. And along the way, I've grown more aware of these technologies and the fact that they are not neutral. Across techno-capitalist industries, and most recently in AI and blockchain and geoengineering, there's been a lot of exacerbation and acceleration of race and class-based oppression. Access, and especially agency, are reserved for a few to plan for the whole world over, while the rest bear the burden of sustaining these increasingly complex systems. Technology is the active decision of how we facilitate our relations with each other and the material conditions of the earth, and this dominant Western worldview aims to use technology to conquer the future. Under the unjust dependencies of globalizing infrastructure, privilege orchestrates extraction across ever more anonymized hands and lands and bolts the door when responsibilities come knocking. But the climate is borderless in its wrathful demands of more honest accounting. Okay, so a return. I would love to invite you to take this moment to just observe the aliveness of your body. every time I talk about this, I feel really riled up. I feel a lot of grief and a lot of emotions. That's coming through right now as well. But how does it feel to breathe? Can you remember the histories of this body, where it has been through time, in this life, in previous ones? Can you notice where you feel tender, where you carry grief, where you might have chronic pains or disabilities, and the memories of all of your cells that linger in your body, the relations of what you eat, your gut microbiome, processing that right now, your lunch, where you've been, where you come from, where you will go. And I invite you also, as you do your body scan, to move your attention through to the bottommost part of your body and extend roots down through this building, through the scaffolds and the foundations, and find soil. It's down there. And when you find the soil, can you remember that it is the epidermis of the ecosystemic body, and it is still here in very direct connection with the roots that we're sending. And can you feel the aliveness of the soil and how our own aliveness comes from the soil and the gift it is to be able to return to the soil and be transformed? Our challenges require a liberation of the imagination. So this year I began to host technological grief rituals that some of us have been to, as a way to understand more deeply the material relations that we have, that we depend on with our infrastructure. What is the anatomy of this infrastructure? Where do our devices, our routers, our servers, our mining rigs, our data centers, our cables, and energy grids come from? And where will they go when they die? The carbon footprint of the internet has now surpassed that of the airline industry, ironically, and more than half of the electricity, at least from the US, is still derived from fossil fuels. We often forget that this fuel is not simply a resource, but actually the remains of carbon-rich trees and creatures you can see here that were once alive in the Carboniferous era 300 million years ago. Likewise, pulled out of the ground under extractive labor conditions, the metals and minerals that make up our electronics have always been there in one shape or another and underground for a long time. And so in a way, when we're mining, we're borrowing deep geological time. To grieve the material of our technological infrastructure is to recognize the life in them. And in grieving, we would like to wish them an afterlife, yet nothing that makes up this metallic sprawl of the last few decades will decompose in 1 million years. Meanwhile, the ghosts of planned obsolescence linger in the water, in the soil, in the air, and of course in our bodies. So I would like to invite you again to remember how it feels like to breathe across this ecosystemic body, to inhale and exhale and come back again. We often dismiss long-standing practices of grief as stasis. Any criticism to techno-capitalist growth is easily cast aside as leadism in its connotation of being against the arrow of progress or change itself. But in a moment like this, we must ask ourselves, where are we so desperate to go? Or is the logic of the clock broken? Counter to linear progress, an intergenerational framework, an ancestral one, recognizes that the Earth operates not on a longer timescale than an agile sprint, but a cyclical one altogether. As the world has always changed and continues to change in perhaps more hostile ways, we need to recalibrate our understanding of what is needed for the ongoing renewal of this ecosystemic body. And as McLuhan says, technology as an extension of the body. I would like to propose this intergenerational way of working on the world, which does not focus on building, but on healing. A worm feasting on food scraps knows better than anyone that death itself is a beginning, and grief poses an important inquiry into the material relations across everything that makes up our technological lives, and with that, the possibility to re-relate anew. Traditional healing methods teach us to stay attuned to where this ecosystemic body is out of balance and find pressure points for undoing harm. And breath itself is a keeper of cyclical time. This reminds us to notice just how permeable we are and how we are very much in the motion of things. Intergenerational technology does not offer a stable solution for a sterile world, but rather the seeds for a living one. Intergenerational technology might feel like a recipe. It might feel like an encryption of knowledge that one can only enact in actual practice over and over and over again, a commitment. Intergenerationality is as resilient as we are alive. It is the memory that is archived in our bodies through our stories by our situated long-term accountability with each other. That is the definition of community that I strive for. To weave intergenerational technology is to, in a way, hyperlink time, grafting long-standing wisdom onto contemporary struggles. I'm posing intergenerational technology as a prompt, as an invitation, and these are some things I can think of that might count as intergenerational technology, and some principles and some movements that are already ongoing and that are really led by folks in crisis that are, putting together different infrastructure and really upskilling together, that are led by the global majority. A lot of really interesting projects out there that are not really recognized as emerging technology, but are very much crisis responsive, that are very much communal and collectively stewarded and consentful. Leaving the seams on technology so that we know how to mend, so that we know how to work in cycles and bring things back to life. Anti-surveillance and community protection that is not focused on just building a way out of policing or carceral tech, but really, first and foremost, it is a fight, and it is to protect, communities that are marginalized, and that in itself is also the work. Other interesting projects like borrowing open source licensing and the definition of that into agriculture, into food justice, and what happens with our seas and how can we take them back into our own hands and keep them open. Other things, a mutual aid fund is an intergenerational technology. A harvest song is an intergenerational technology. A darning needle is an intergenerational technology. Making food together is an intergenerational technology. These are the emerging technologies that I'm interested in, and these are the emerging technologies that need our collective attention. They need a diversion of power, reparations of capital, and wholehearted, longstanding conviction. And here's where you can find more of my work, and you can reach out directly if you're curious to chat more. Yeah, thanks for being here.
Alice, thanks so much. Something that was really resonating with me as you were speaking, was the the nature of cyclical action and change that you're describing, a cyclical process, and something that Marshall McLuhan said was that the content of any new, or that the content of any new medium is always the old medium, television or movies swallowing books, television swallowing movies, and so on and so forth. Now we have TikTok and Be Real and everything else that I like to waste my time with. So I'm wondering how this notion of media moving through these different phases and kind of consuming each other, how does that resonate with you, especially given your practice as a media artist using a lot of these technologies?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I would first like to just bring back this idea of grafting. I think for especially a lot of folks in, our healing practices of diasporic remembering and so on, there's an irreverence to that. And so in terms of even just grief practices, I'm improvising a lot of the times. And so medium in itself is very much this alive thing. And I think it's very much true that the message for me is how to practice this and, for example, with the grief rituals, how to hold space and how to keep this alive. And that is the thing. But yeah, I think there's a lot of this, the irreverence, the experimentation, and the adaptation, of being in whichever particular environment and with whatever language we have to work with, with whatever materials and capacities we have. The only thing that really grounds it for me, I think, is the need. Like, how are we asking and, acknowledging and tending to the needs that we have across all levels, the material needs, but also the spiritual needs and communal needs. But also, how are we paying attention to the epicenters of oppression and really recognizing the web of responsibilities that we're very much tied into. Now with, globalization, I think it's fair to say that if you're not in the epicenters of oppression, you may very well be playing a part in accelerating the machine of it. And so, yeah, there's a lot of, the needs to reground in, and then the mediums follow.
Absolutely. And I was also, thinking through your work that's in the show here in the space. In the back of the room, we have Autophagy on the floor. It's an augmented reality piece, and Open Garden on the wall, which was a durational performance. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about, your practice about collectivity and community and organizing and labor and agency. I know that you recently completed a large research project thinking through DAO structure and different ways that decentralized technologies might be involved in this equation. And I was wondering if you might be so kind as to share with us some insights that you've learned from this research, or any, practices that felt really holistic and fruitful for you versus things that were damaging or restrictive.
Yeah, thanks for teeing that up. So as Wade mentioned, in the past more than half year now, I've been doing research on becoming infrastructure, and in particular have been spending time looking at what the heck is going on with Web3, what does it ask of us, what are our responsibilities there, what questions is it posing, and I find Web3 to be really fascinating. I often say that it's for me, a journey of exorcisms to just really reckon with it, and also that it assigns us a lot of homework. As in, Web3 is really interesting in that I look at it not as just the more vocal and loudest and well-funded kind of cultural imagination and the direction of that, but I'm interested in the cracks in there, what doesn't work, but what are the projections that we're coming in with that actually point back to our needs, right? The anxieties that are there around financial stability, especially as artists, around what to do with the climate, and can we bring carbon markets onto the blockchain blockchain, and will that get us there? You know, there's all of these questions, you know, around collective organizing as we kind of lose faith a bit more in our state and, you know, like traditional institutions. And so I'm interested in those questions and the needs behind them, but I'm not so convinced about exactly, you know, the Web3 framework of how to get there. I think it's, you know, coming from a like a traditional medicinal approach. It's actually the root of the, you know, the illnesses are deeper, and we have to invest in material change at that level.
So much, Alice. Appreciate you.